counting on our members for the follow-ups, unless I can't resist. You mentioned Afghanistan, and you emphasized what you thought was the correct strategic decision. As you know from our exchanges, that's not a unanimous view up on this stage here. And you talked a lot about the efforts we'd made to get people out, Americans and Afghans. But let's talk about what seems to be now the biggest immediate issue, which is you've got millions of people in Afghanistan who are on the precipice, I don't think it's too dramatic to say, of death. As winter approaches, mass starvation, a lack of access to medical care, a totally non-functioning economy. And many would say the biggest impediment right now is less the Taliban than it is U.S. sanctions and U.S. influence in various international financial institutions, which is making it extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, for the Afghanistan economy to function. Could you say something about the conversations with the Taliban, about conditions that we are suggesting need to be met before help could be forthcoming? Are we prepared to provide certain amounts of help unconditionally?
We have and we are providing assistance to Afghanistan. The United States is the largest donor to Afghanistan. We've provided nearly $500 million, allocated over $500 million just over the last few months for humanitarian purposes in Afghanistan through the UN and non-governmental organizations. The Treasury Department has issued general licenses to make clear to the United Nations, international institutions, and NGOs that they can operate on the ground in Afghanistan and provide humanitarian assistance, including food assistance, which has been a major part of the emphasis of U.S. aid. We've done a general license to allow remittances to flow from Afghans outside the country to their families inside the country. And we have worked with the United Nations and other international institutions to dramatically accelerate the provision of liquidity as well as resources to ensure that the basic human needs of the people of Afghanistan are being met. We're also talking to the Taliban and telling them that to the extent they would like direct assistance from any country, including the United States, they need to live up to their basic obligations, their international humanitarian obligations, their human rights obligations, and their commitments on questions of counterterrorism. We've had that conversation directly and clearly with them, and our view is that at the moment, given what we have seen so far, the United States and the international community should be routing aid not through the Taliban government, but through international institutions and non-governmental organizations.
And if this situation persists, say, for another couple of months, do you think that a massive humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan could and would be averted, or do we need to consider, if the Taliban are not going to do what we would like them to do in certain areas, are we prepared to consider, for example, unfreezing Afghan funds in the United States?
So the Afghan funds that are frozen in the United States are subject to litigation here. That needs to be worked through. But that is not the proximate issue. The proximate issue is actually getting the relief to people across the country as winter approaches. We're going to do everything we can financially, logistically, operationally to help what is a really intrepid and remarkable group of people who are out there trying to solve this problem, to help them be able to solve it. This is a problem of immense human significance, as you said. It's a life or death issue, and it matters to us in that respect. It's also a matter of strategic significance because, of course, the collapse of Afghanistan in a full and fundamental way will have all kinds of reverberating impacts. So we are attuned to this. We are engaged on it. We are working intensively with international partners. And we're also calling on other countries in the region to step up and do their part. The United States has a responsibility here, to be sure. But countries in the region, neighboring countries, also have a responsibility. And they should be asked to do their part as well.
And do you see, speaking of one neighboring country there, that Pakistan, which played a damaging role for 2 decades in providing sanctuary to the Taliban, do you see any evidence that Pakistan is playing a more responsible role now?
You know, there is a lot in terms of the engagement between Islamabad and the folks in the Taliban and the Haqqani network that we do not see. So it is difficult for me to characterize the nature of their role. What I would say is that from the point of view of allowing humanitarian access, and allowing other forms of relief, the Pakistani government has also been very worried about the crisis there, and has wanted to be forward-leaning and engaging with us, the United States, on trying to address some of these fundamental elements of the humanitarian situation. On the broader politics of Afghanistan, it's difficult for me to characterize.
You mentioned Iran in your comments. It was obviously your and your colleagues' preference, I assume it still is, that we, the United States and Iran, get back into the 2015 JCPOA. Two questions. One, how's the going? And then, and on the off chance, not so well,
Yeah.
what is the limits to our, as you acknowledge, Iran is well on its way. It's already in the zip code of becoming what you might call a threshold nuclear weapon state. And the amount of lead time we would have if they decided to make a sprint towards nuclear weapons has been dramatically reduced because we've seen the unraveling of the JCPOA, for the record, initiated by us with the unilateral exit by the previous administration in 2018. What are the limits to our tolerance? And does Iran understand that? Do they understand there are limits to American tolerance about their nuclear activities?
We have communicated both through the Europeans and directly to Iran our view on their continued forward progress on the program, our alarm about it. And I'm not going to say more publicly about what those precise messages are because I believe that Iran understands them, but don't want to negotiate in public on them. To your broader question on how's it going, it's not going well in the sense that we do not yet have a pathway back into the JCPOA. The last few days, I think, have brought some progress at the bargaining table, but in the meantime, since we walked away from a deal that had fundamentally put a lid on Iran's nuclear program, they have raced that program forward. And getting that program back into the box through a return to mutual compliance with the JCPOA has proven more difficult over the course of this year than we would have liked to see. And we are paying the wages of the disastrous decision to leave the deal back in 2018.